Good evening and welcome to Gravitas. I'm Palki, Sharma, Upadhyay. Let's get started. "2022 is here, but the pandemic is not going anywhere. Unfortunately, the third wave has begun in India. 75% of the new cases in Indian metros are of Omicron. Doesn't that sound a lot like the previous year? But before you make up your mind or answer this question, I want you to focus on another statistic. The biggest hotspot for India is Mumbai. Over 8,000 new cases were detected there in the last 24 hours. And here is the most important takeaway. 90% of these cases are asymptomatic. The patients are not showing any symptoms at all. And that is the global trend. The death toll from Omicron is not even 1% of the caseload, not even 1%. What does that mean for us? Can our lives go back to normal? Mild infections from Omicron are a reason to be optimistic. But now is not the time to let our guard down. On Gravitas tonight, we'll discuss. Also on the show, the home country of the Wuhan virus has started 2022 with a jolt. The Evergrande crisis has worsened in a year that's being described as make or break for Xi Jinping. In Sri Lanka, the financial crisis has intensified. Colombo closes 3 foreign missions to save money. In an extremely rare incident, a man crosses the heavily guarded border from South Korea to the north. Seoul says he was a North Korean defector who has returned. And is the US democracy collapsing? A new report predicts dictatorship in America by 2030. We'll talk about it. We begin as always with Gravitas Global Headlines.
Over 4 million Indian teenagers have received their first dose of India's homegrown vaccine. On the first day of the vaccination drive for 15 to 18-year-olds, authorities say over 5 million eligible teenagers registered to get a jab. Over 4 million Indian teenagers. Sudan's Prime Minister Abdullah Hamdok has resigned 6 weeks after he returned to his post following a controversial deal with the military. This comes after protests erupted in Sudan, rejecting the deal and demanding a civilian political rule in the country. Pakistan's Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi downplays rows over the Durand Line amid reports of the Taliban removing border fencing. Qureshi says whatever little issues there are will be resolved. India has sought an emergency meeting of the General Council of the World Trade Organization to discuss the WTO's proposed response package, including a patent waiver proposal. Amid the ongoing currency crisis, Turkey's inflation has surged to a 19-year high. This is the highest since October 2002, when inflation reached 33.45% before Erdogan's party came to power. One of the most popular online news portals in Hong Kong, Citizen News, has become the third media outlet to cease operations, as Beijing resorts to a sweeping crackdown on dissent and free media in Hong Kong. Egypt's Red Sea resort of Hurghada witnessed a rare snowfall over the weekend. Video footage showed heavy hail falling down on cars in almost empty streets as most of the city's residents and tourists stayed indoors. The Colorado governor toured damaged neighborhoods in Boulder County as he witnessed firsthand the devastation caused by the massive wildfire that destroyed nearly 1,000 homes and other buildings. Flames ripped through at least 24 square kilometers in suburbs between Denver and Boulder. Greek world number 4 Stefanos Tsitsipas crashed to defeat in his first singles match since elbow surgery, losing to Argentina's Diego Schwartzman in the ATP Cup. The result extends Argentina's perfect record to 2 matches and means that Greece can no longer make the semi-finals. Bangladesh have ended day 3 of the first test against New Zealand at an impressive 401 for 6. 4 Bangladesh players have scored half-centuries, and the Tigers have already survived 156 overs at Mount Maunganui, which is a record for them in a test outside Asia. The visitors are 73 ahead of the Kiwis, who were bowled out for 328 in the first innings.
It's 2022, the third year of the pandemic, and hopefully the last. The Omicron surge is now global, as is the question: what should we do? Shut ourselves up again or go about our lives? Because this seems like an endless cycle. Let me show you what happened with a woman in the US. She's a teacher. A few days back, she boarded a flight from Chicago to Iceland. On the flight, her throat started hurting. As luck would have it, she was carrying a rapid COVID test with her. So she tested herself. The result was positive. Now remember, she was still on the flight. 5 hours to go for landing. Do you know what she did? She locked herself up in the lavatory. You could say it was one of the most dramatic instances of voluntary self-isolation. Upon landing, she checked herself at a Red Cross hotel. And she remained isolated until she recovered. There were 150 other passengers on the flight with her. What do you think would have happened had they found out that they were traveling with a COVID-positive patient? It would have led to panic. So she took a flight attendant into confidence, who gave her food and drinks through the remainder of her journey and attended to her. What do you make of this story? Is there a lesson here? And why are we discussing this teacher tonight? Because she set an example. She boarded the flight well prepared. She did not panic. She did not make others panic. She took the steps that needed to be taken and ensured the safety of others while taking care of herself. I'm telling you the story so that you know that there are ingenious solutions to difficult situations. Now, it's a fact that cases are rising. This is not the first wave in this pandemic, and by all indications, it won't be the last. So what do? The world needs a new mantra to deal with the virus. Prevent, not panic. Prepare, not panic. On Gravitas tonight, we'll talk about how to deal with the Wuhan virus in 2022. We'll begin, as always, with the numbers. Omicron has become the dominant variant worldwide. It has reached 132 countries and territories. How many cases now? Well over 400,000. How many deaths? 85 so far. Do you know how much that is in percentage terms? 0.02. 0.02. And that is the major takeaway. The death toll from Omicron is not even 1%. What about India? The trend is more or less similar. There is a massive spike in cases. More than 30,000 tested positive in the last 24 hours. So far, 1,700 patients have Omicron in India. 23 states and union territories have reported cases. 639 Omicron patients have recovered already. How many deaths? 2. Again, that's less than 1%. And by the way, India began vaccinating teenagers today, 15 to 18-year-olds. They're now eligible. 4 million teenagers got a shot today. So if you're eligible, make sure you register yourself and get the vaccine. Back to Omicron. It is confusing the world. The casualty figures are very good. They're very low, which is great. It's a reason to be optimistic. The infections are mild. Again, good news. But here's the problematic part. No matter which variant of the Wuhan virus infects you, you're still at the risk of long COVID. So we may recover immediately, but it's not clear what kind of dangers still lurk. Going by one study, more than 100 million survivors, 100 million people worldwide, suffer from long COVID. These are people who were infected once, they recovered, but they still keep falling ill. Again and again, the symptoms never really go away. What kind of symptoms? Fatigue, shortness of breath, insomnia, joint pain, memory problems like brain fog. Some or all of them persist. And it may be the same with Omicron. Anywhere between 10 to 30% of the patients could still get long COVID. And that's not something to be taken lightly. Imagine what happens if millions of patients keep coming back to hospital. No global healthcare system is designed to handle such a massive caseload. In fact, many are already struggling with Omicron. Look at the United States. It's reporting about 400,000 new cases a day. These are Wuhan virus infections, including Omicron. 400,000 patients testing positive every day. Among the latest is U.S. Secretary of State Lloyd Austin. He tested positive on Sunday. Now, these are way too many cases. Many American hospitals are overwhelmed. As of last week, 6 major health systems in Georgia were reporting a massive surge in hospitalization. They've jumped by 100 to 200%. Patients were asked to get their Wuhan virus tests elsewhere. Doctors and health workers wanted to focus on the emergency room. Same with Louisiana. Hospitalization tripled in 2 weeks there. America's top infectious disease expert, Dr. Anthony Fauci, has issued a warning. He says more people could need hospitalization.
The virus does seem to have a lower intrinsic pathogenicity to it. We're hoping that's the case. But having said that, George, I want to say one thing. We've got to be careful about that, because even if you have a less of a percentage of severity, when you have multifold more people getting infected, the net amount is you're still going to get a lot of people that are going to be needing hospitalization. And that's the reason why we're concerned about stressing and straining the hospital system.
It isn't just the U.S. Israel is among the most vaccinated countries in the world. Even they are struggling with rising caseloads. In 11 days, new cases have more than quadrupled. Let me show you some pictures. These cars are not looking for a parking spot. They're carrying people who want to get tested for the Wuhan virus. The lines are seemingly endless in Jerusalem and Ashdod. Local health officials have a dire prediction. 1/3 of the population could get infected in 3 weeks. Israel is already running out of test kits. They're now being forced to ration. Prime Minister Naftali Bennett might change the criteria for testing. Reports say going forward, only those showing symptoms would be allowed to take the test. Bennett believes Omicron needs a new approach.
Omicron is not Delta. It's a different ballgame altogether. We must keep our eye on the ball, act swiftly and decisively if we want to continue engaging and working with an open country as much as possible throughout this pandemic.
The rising number of cases could result in herd immunity. That's what the Director General of the Israeli Health Ministry has said. Let me quote from what he has said. The cost will be a great many infections. The numbers will have to be very high in order to reach herd immunity. This is possible, but we don't want to reach herd immunity by means of infections. We want it to happen as a result of many people vaccinating. That would be ideal, but that's not how it's playing out. Moral of the story, vaccines are only part of the solution. Israel is giving the second booster and yet reporting a surge. Point number 2 to note, cases are rising and very fast. Omicron has spread to more than 100 countries. A wave is unavoidable wherever you are. Number 3, cases are mild, so it won't be as devastating as Delta, or so the trend suggests so far. Number 4, vaccines and masks are still our best bet. Our health systems can cope with the surge only when they're not overwhelmed. And for that to happen, you need to follow the rules. You don't have to stop your life. Living with the new variant is the new normal. Meanwhile, in China, the home country of the Wuhan virus, another virus is spreading. It's not a disease. It's the virus of debt, and it is infecting the Chinese economy. China has begun the new year with a jolt. Trading of Evergrande shares was suddenly halted today. Another controversy has hit the developer. It is the world's most indebted real estate player. Evergrande owes more than $300 billion. The company has failed to repay its creditors so far, and now it is facing a crackdown. Evergrande has got some orders from the authorities in Hainan. Evergrande had built 39 buildings there. The local government now wants them demolished. and the company has been given 10 days to comply. Why did the authorities in Hainan issue these orders? Reports say the building permits for these projects were illegally obtained. So the solution is to tear down these 39 buildings and destroy the development. Billions of dollars worth of investment will go down the drain. According to the Global Times, more than $28 billion was spent on this project. And now Evergrande has been given a week's time to blow the entire thing up. These orders became public on Saturday. Today, Evergrande suspended the trading of its stock. The company did not say why, but that's what they did. Last week, Evergrande missed a $255 million payment. Creditors have lost confidence in the company, and now the Chinese government, too, could be gearing up to execute a controlled implosion of Evergrande. The cleanup is imperative. You see, 2022 is a very important year for Xi Jinping. He's going to be anointed China's leader for a record third term. It's a matter of formality, we know. Xi Jinping logged his extension last year itself. In November, the Communist Party approved a resolution. It paved the way for President Xi's third term in office. In the fall of 2022, this year, the extension will be made official. Xi Jinping will finally get his wish. The tag, the greatest leader since Mao, will no longer remain a description. It will become a title. But the debt crisis could ruin Xi Jinping's big party. The real estate sector is the biggest driver of growth in China. It contributes 29% of the country's GDP. The Chinese housing market is worth close to $2 trillion. That's 7 times bigger than the US market. And Evergrande's fall is going to have a domino effect. Last month, the Chinese government intervened. A risk committee was created for Evergrande. Its job was to restructure the entire company. Officials from Chinese state-backed institutions are on this committee. Earlier, you see, Beijing was sitting on the sidelines, observing what was going on. Now it's very much part of resolving this crisis. It has taken a hands-on role. The priority is not to make sure that everyone gets their money. The priority is to make sure that there is social stability in China, to make sure that there is no unrest that could embarrass the Communist Party or Xi Jinping himself. So Chinese buyers in Evergrande projects, local investors, suppliers and contractors, they could get their money first, the locals. What about the rest? They will either have to wait or forget about their investments. There is no guarantee that Evergrande will pay back each and every creditor, and there are way too many of them. So that's how Beijing plans to manage the crisis at Evergrande, but it's only one company. And it's not the only crisis that they will have to manage. The real estate sector in China is on shaky ground. How will China stop the entire thing from imploding? 2022 is a make or break year for China's real estate players too. According to S&P, 1/3 of Chinese developers could face a liquidity crunch in the next 12 months. China's property market as a whole owes a whopping $5 trillion. That's 1/3 of the country's GDP, $5 trillion. This month is going to be critical. The Chinese property sector needs $197 billion. Everyone is lining up for payment. $173 billion needs to be paid to workers as wages. A little more than $7 billion as payment towards debt. These are dollar bonds that are due. Chinese investors need to be paid back. They are owed more than $37 billion. 37 billion in yuan, in fact. That's more than $7 billion. The total bill is $197 billion. And this includes deferred wages to migrant workers and overdue debt payments from the last 2 months combined. Clearly, these companies don't have the money to pay. Workers are not getting their salaries, home buyers are not getting their homes, creditors are not getting their money. Had this happened anywhere else, it would have made big news, but not in China. The victims of China's debt virus are being censored. The president, meanwhile, insists that China is on the path to great rejuvenation. This was Xi Jinping's grand New Year pronouncement. Listen to this.
Comrades, friends, ladies and gentlemen, my greetings to you all. The year 2022 is approaching. From Beijing, I extend New Year wishes to all of you. The past year has been a year of exceptional significance. We have lived through landmark events in the history of our party and our country. At the historical convergence of the two centenary goals, we have set out on a new journey of building a modern socialist country in all respects, and are making confident strides on the path toward the great rejuvenation of the Chinese nation.
Xi Jinping might not talk about the problem yet, but more defaults could force him to face the reality. China's great revival has been fueled by debt, and the bubble is beginning to burst. So entire cities under lockdown, big ticket companies on their knees. And what does China do? Spin the narrative, 2021, 2022, it doesn't matter. The Chinese propaganda machine continues to roll on. They've released a new video. The setting is the icy peaks of the Galwan Valley. Or at least that's what China claims. Their propaganda films are not exactly famous for accuracy. What does the video show? A ceremony of sorts. A few PLA soldiers are standing in formation. They have unfurled a massive flag of the People's Republic. You can hear chants, slogans. It's basically communist hyper-nationalism on steroids. But what's the occasion? Well, this is China's way of saying Happy New Year. How neighborly. Elsewhere, the sentiment was different. Indian and Chinese soldiers were exchanging gifts in eastern Ladakh and Sikkim. They swapped sweets and greetings on New Year. Now, all of us got gifts this holiday season. Maybe some of you found those gifts confusing or pointless. Well, spare a thought for these soldiers then. We're talking about sub-zero temperatures. Sweets are not smooth and succulent there. It's more like a pebble. I know some of you might say that it's the gesture that counts. Well, I would say it's the intention that counts more. You can't exchange gifts in Ladakh while claiming territory elsewhere. That's what China is doing in Arunachal Pradesh. Beijing has always claimed sovereignty over this Indian state. They call it Southern Tibet. And last week they sought to reinforce their claim. How? By renaming places in Arunachal Pradesh, or rather reinventing names. China's Civil Affairs Department has quote-unquote standardized names of 15 locations. These include 8 residential regions, 4 mountains, 2 rivers and 1 mountain pass. Now remember, these are Indian lands. Indian citizens live there, but China wants to rename them. How has the Indian government reacted? Let me quote from what the government of India said. Arunachal Pradesh has always been and will always be an integral part of India. Assigning invented names to places in Arunachal Pradesh does not alter this fact. No arguments there. Arunachal Pradesh is an integral part of India. Naming or renaming places does not change that fact. So why is China doing it? Because stunts like these are good publicity back home. Any stunt, in fact. We've shown you 2 images today. 1, the parade at Galwan, and 2, the sweet exchange in Sikkim. Chinese state media has been pushing both these videos. They have been viewed by millions of people, or millions of times, on Chinese social media. The fact is, the Chinese public loves it. Soldiers shouting in sub-zero temperatures, a massive Chinese flag being unfurled near the border. All of this is theatre, jingoistic theatre, and we shouldn't be surprised. Because this is how autocratic regimes work. They hide domestic failures with foreign policy muscles. China's Wuhan virus cases are rising again. Its biggest companies are falling off the global radar. Xi Jinping's crackdown on everything is becoming unpopular, so his propaganda machine goes into overdrive. It's straight off the dictator's manual. As for China's real intentions, it's more complicated. China had many chances, really, to resolve the border standoff with India, but they did not. They wanted to keep India occupied. They wanted to keep the line of actual control active. Just look at their recent actions. Around 20 months of standoff, 20 months, 13 rounds of military talks. India has consistently pushed for complete pullback. But China continued to block. They have amassed more than 50,000 troops near the border. They're building airports, roads and bridges. They've deployed rocket launchers, bombers and missiles. But recently, there have been overtures too, subtle yet significant overtures. On the 7th of December, India's outgoing ambassador to China met with Foreign Minister Wang Yi. The talks were unexpected but welcome. Both sides praised the uninterrupted line of communication even during crises. Then there is bilateral trade. Standoff or not, India-China trade continues to grow. In 2021, it crossed $100 billion, out of which Chinese exports make up around $87 billion. The fact is, China needs the Indian market, hence the subtle outreach. The question is, how should India respond? It's a tough question. It's not an easy call. On the one hand, you have jingoistic videos from Galwan, villages renamed in Arunachal Pradesh, and heavy deployments along the LAC. On the other, you have such nimble overtures. India has two choices here. One, pursue an unlikely mission for peace. Or two, keep the pressure on Beijing. To make matters worse, it's election season in India. Foreign policy has nothing to do with state elections, but politicians find a way to talk about it. The video from Galwan is creating a buzz, a lot of buzz in fact, on social media. Opposition parties want the government to react aggressively. But if they do, peace will continue to be stalled. I know it's not an easy call, but I guess that's why politicians get all of this attention. Taking tough calls is their job. So we'll keep tracking the story. In the meantime, wrapping with another propaganda video. Ridiculous does not even begin to cover it. Perhaps China's got the wrong calendar. It's not April Fool's Day yet. Look at this. On to Sri Lanka now, which has started 2022 on a rather precarious note. The island nation's economic woes have forced it to shut down its overseas diplomatic missions. Colombo has temporarily closed 3 of its foreign missions. Why? To save foreign reserves and cut down on expenditure. Which missions are these? The Sri Lankan High Commission in Abuja, Nigeria, the Consulate General of Sri Lanka in Frankfurt, Germany, and another consulate in Nicosia in Cyprus. They've all suspended operations starting the 1st of January. Commenting on the closures, the Foreign Ministry of Sri Lanka said that it has only undertaken what it calls restructuring in order to minimize expenditure on the maintenance of its missions. Now, these closures are essentially an attempt to stay financially afloat. These are desperate times in Sri Lanka. The country is facing its worst financial meltdown in its history, one which reports claim could leave Colombo bankrupt by the end of 2022. That's what the report says. How true is this assertion? Let's look at what the numbers say. In the next 12 months, Sri Lanka has to pay $7.3 billion in domestic and foreign loans. This includes $500 million sovereign bond repayments by the end of this month. How much money is currently available in Sri Lanka's foreign reserves? $1.6 billion. How will they manage? Well, reports say Colombo plans to settle some of its debts by turning commodities into payment methods. Last month, Sri Lanka used tea to pay off $251 million in oil debt to Iran. But will every country be game for such barters? Will every financial body accept tea instead of money? Sri Lanka is expected to default on its payments. Its citizens are going to have to pay the price for that. I have some more figures to show you. The fear of this financial crisis has triggered record-breaking inflation in the country. In November 2021, inflation in Sri Lanka stood at 9.9%. By the end of December, the figure had touched 12.1%. Then we have food inflation. In November 2021, it stood at 17.5%. By the end of December, it was 22.1%. So with inflation at record high, prices of all essential items are soaring. Wheat, flour, cement, prices have gone up by 10%. Petroleum and cooking gas, 85%. Milk powder, 12.5%. The World Bank estimates that nearly 500,000 Sri Lankans are now living below the poverty line, and this figure will only go up in the coming year. The country's rich and elite are planning to leave. Look at this headline: an increasing number of Sri Lankans lining up to migrate. This is from a survey that was conducted in November 2021. It found that 1 in 4 Sri Lankan citizens is looking to migrate in order to escape the impending financial doom. How does the Rajapaksa government plan to stop them? How does it plan to get Sri Lanka out of this economic crisis, the same way Pakistan repeatedly does? Through an IMF bailout, the Sri Lankan cabinet is reportedly planning to seek bailout funds from the International Monetary Fund. A high-level cabinet meeting for this purpose was held earlier today, and what happened in the meeting is yet to be revealed. The story is still developing. We will keep you posted. Next week, India's Defence Minister Rajnath Singh will embark on a 3-day visit to Vietnam. Officially, he's going there to celebrate the golden jubilee of diplomatic ties between New Delhi and Hanoi. But there's another reason behind this visit, and that is to strengthen India's defence export market. Reports say the Defence Minister is expected to hold talks on the acquisition of Indian defence equipment. A lot of items have been named in this list, but one stands out: the Brahmos cruise missile. For the uninitiated, the Brahmos is a short-range supersonic anti-ship cruise missile developed in 1998 through a joint venture between India and Russia. It has a range of anywhere between 3 to 500 kilometers and a Mach 2.8. It can fly at up to 3 times the speed of light, of sound, in fact. Vietnam wants to buy this missile from India. The talks for acquisition have been underway for at least a year. The Vietnamese government wants to modernize its military, equip itself with new weapons to deter China's growing aggression. So next week, when Defence Minister Rajnath Singh lands in Vietnam, this acquisition is going to feature prominently in the talks. And Vietnam is just one of the countries eyeing the Brahmos. There's another customer in the waiting, the Philippines. Let me show you another headline. The government of the Philippines has reportedly set aside funds for the acquisition of the Brahmos missile. It is said to have allocated at least $55.5 million. And this report comes barely a month after a high-level visit by Navy officials from the country. They visited the Brahmos aerospace production unit in Hyderabad as part of the procurement process. So we have 2 Southeast Asian countries looking to procure an Indian missile. 2 countries which happen to be also related to China. Vietnam is currently engaged in a dispute with China over the Paracel Islands, a chain of small coral islands in the South China Sea. Beijing has forcefully occupied all of these islands over 45 years. But Vietnam does not acknowledge the Chinese rule. It claims sovereignty over these islands. In April 2020, a Vietnamese shipping boat with at least 8 people on board was hit by a Chinese ship near the Paracel Islands. The boat sank along with the crew. And since then, there have been numerous instances of Chinese ships colliding with Vietnamese boats. This has kept ties between the 2 countries rather tense. Then we have the Philippines, another victim of Chinese aggression and incursions. It engaged in a dispute with China in the Whitsun Reef, a major fishing area located along the Spratly Islands in the South China Sea. The Philippines considers this reef to be part of its exclusive economic zone. China does not agree. In May 2021, at least 200 Chinese vessels entered this area. They stayed there for several hours. The incursion sent alarm bells ringing in the Philippines. It called China's move, in fact, a provocative action aimed at militarization. So clearly, both Vietnam and the Philippines do not consider China a friend. Both of them share a troubled relationship with Beijing, and their interest in purchasing the Brahmos missile should be seen in that context. Not only will it pull these countries closer into India's strategic orbit, it will also give India an edge over the Chinese regime. Let's now talk about what happened on the Korean Peninsula. A very interesting story, a very rare story, in fact. It's been called an extremely rare incident. A man crossed the heavily guarded border from South Korea to the north. A border that is said to be nightmarishly difficult to cross, yet the defector went unnoticed. Who was he? Seoul says he was a North Korean defector who has now returned home. Their claims, however, do not add up. Our next report tells you why.
This is the Korean DMZ, short for the Korean Demilitarized Zone, the most fortified strip of land in the world. It's 250 kilometers long and 4 kilometers wide. It separates North Korea from South Korea. On New Year's Day, a daring defection unfolded along the DMZ. An unidentified man crossed this heavily armed border. He entered North Korea from the south. The person's fate is unknown, but thermal cameras on the South Korean side detected 4 people on the other side of the border, suggesting that he was taken away by North Korean troops.
Last night, an unidentified person defected to North Korea through eastern side of the demilitarized zone, and the Joint Chiefs of Staff inspection team is currently checking the scene.
The story is both rare and unusual. Why would a South Korean defect to North Korea? The answer remains a mystery. South Korea's explanation makes one even more suspicious. It says the defector was in fact from North Korea and had slipped into South Korea in late 2020. On New Year's Day, he crawled back to his home country, apparently to escape economic difficulties. It's unclear if this is exactly what happened, but if it indeed is the case, then it raises serious questions about South Korea's security posture. The Korean DMZ is said to be one of the most heavily guarded stretches of land in the world. It's littered with scores of mines, land traps, barbed wire fences, and troops ready for combat. All of this makes the border nightmarishly difficult to cross. The odds of making it through are said to be astronomical, especially to North Korea, where troops are known to shoot any defector on first sight. In fact, in September 2020, North Korea fatally shot a South Korean fisheries official, who was found floating in North Korean waters along a sea boundary. Here we have a defector who traversed the entire border, went unnoticed by South Korean troops, and instead of getting killed, was welcomed back by the North Korean military. Who exactly was this man? Was he a spy? We may never really know, but South Korea certainly has some serious checks to do. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
How do you define democracy? In schools, we've heard a popular description. Democracy is a government of, for, and by the people. Of the people, for the people, by the people. Do you know who said that? Former US President Abraham Lincoln. Those were different times, though. Today, US presidents are accused of war crimes. They deal in conspiracy theories. Today's America is not a guardian of democracy. It's a self-appointed class monitor that has lost its way. America's rise in world politics was not pretty. Wars, interventions, all kinds of illegal operations. America's fall could be even uglier. A Canadian political scientist paints a worrisome picture. Here's what he says. By 2025, American democracy will collapse. There will be civil disobedience, political instability, and by 2030, a dictator will take over, a right-wing authoritarian. That's what the political scientist predicts. And who will that dictator be? Most likely Donald Trump. That's according to this report. He will return to the White House in 2024, and then he will systematically dismantle American democracies. I know it sounds far-fetched. Surely American democracy is stronger than this. Too strong to collapse, perhaps. But let me ask you a few questions. Did you think Donald Trump would win in 2016? Did you think his supporters would attack the US Capitol in 2021? The fact is, anything goes. American democracy has been teetering for a while now. So a complete collapse cannot be ruled out. Most surveys support this. Polarizing elements are creeping into the American mainstream. White nationalists are hijacking politics. And this is the result. 64% Americans feel their democracy is in crisis. 2/3 of all Republicans believe the last presidential election was rigged. And 70% people say America is at risk of failing. 70%. If you put these numbers together, what do you get? What happened on January the 6th last year? Thousands of Trump supporters breached the U.S. Capitol building. They vandalized offices, fired guns. What do most Americans think about this incident? Here's what the Washington Post found. 1 in 3 Americans think violence against their government is justified. 1 in 3. So attacking senators, vandalizing the Congress, all of it is justified. Do you see the trend here? No trust in elections, a deeply polarized society, and normalization of violence. This is how democracy dies. And it's not just limited to the public. Even the US Army is going undemocratic. New reports say extremism and white supremacy is rife in their ranks, and the rules don't help. For instance, soldiers are not banned from joining extremists like the Ku Klux Klan. I'm not saying soldiers are joining KKK. I'm saying it is not banned. Last year, the US was labeled a backsliding democracy. Now, usually Washington loves these little lists, but this time they were not making it. They were actually on the list, and I would say deservedly so. We saw what happened in January last year, hundreds of protesters breaching the US Congress. If that was in West Asia or Latin America, what would Washington have done? Probably sent the CIA and a few thousand Marines. For what? To quote-unquote restore democracy. Well, who will restore democracy in Washington, D.C.? Or can the Americans do no wrong? This has been the attitude for decades. Democracy is what America says it is. It tastes like McDonald's, it sounds like rock and roll, and it looks like Hollywood. That was the attitude. We have so many examples of this American arrogance. Just look at Latin America. One report says the US tried to topple regimes 41 times in the 20th century. 41 times in 100 years. They spied on leaders, they funded juntas, they plotted assassinations. Does this sound like a garden of democracy? I have more examples. Iran. Before 1953, Iran had a democratically elected government. But that's when the US orchestrated a coup. They deposed the prime minister and backed the Shah of Iran. Nobody asked them to. The people of Iran certainly did not. But that's what the United States is for you. They interfere because they can. Same in Afghanistan. The US overthrew the Taliban in 2001. Great. But what was their next step? They imposed their own system on Afghanistan, a presidential system in a country with more than a dozen ethnicities and hundreds of tribal loyalties. And this is precisely the problem with the US. They think one size fits all. Their democracy fits all societies. Their system fits all peoples. But democracy does not work that way. So this prophesied collapse of American democracy is karma, plain and simple. Finally, a cheesy story. We're talking about food, and I have a question. What's the most versatile ingredient in Indian vegetarian food? I think we have a tie between potatoes and paneer. They mix with everything pretty much, except that paneer has won the PR game. It has infiltrated everything from starters to desserts. From Domino's pizzas to Subway sandwiches, international chains have endorsed the Indian cheese. Paneer in chow mein is India's answer to China's expansionism. Jokes aside, if you're eating vegetarian in India, there's no escaping the paneer. And now it's trending on TikTok. Beat that. It's the toast of the diet conscious, the king of keto meals. What is keto? It's short for ketogenic. It's a diet that is rich in fat and protein and low on carbs. It is said to force the body to burn fats rather than carbs. Keto is all the rage among a growing number of people. The United States is the largest market for ketogenic diets. In 2019, the market was valued at $9.5 billion. By 2027, the keto market in the US is projected to grow to almost $15 billion. In 2020, the word keto was the most Googled food-related topic globally. It had more than 25 million searches. Keto has overtaken previously popular diets such as Atkins and intermittent fasting. In 2018, North America accounted for 43.5% of the global keto market. In the years ahead, Europe is projected to see a market growth of 32%. Long story short, a lot of people are switching to keto. Where does paneer come in? It's a made-for-keto cheese, high in protein and fat, plus the kind of cheese that holds its shape in high temperatures. So you can use it in all kinds of recipes. So it's no surprise that the Indian cheese is on course to rule the US dairy scene. British and American supermarket chains are now stocking different brands of paneer. Back in India, though, paneer is being challenged on the gourmet pedestal as the middle class develops a taste for other varieties of cheese. Check with your local grocery. You'll be spoiled for choice. But it's safe to say the mass appeal of paneer remains unrivaled. The debate in India is not about the cheese, it's about the origin. Some say the Portuguese brought it to Bengal. Others claim it was mentioned in the Vedas and originated in the subcontinent. Most food historians, though, agree that it was brought to India by travelers from Afghanistan and Iran. In fact, the word paneer is Persian. Its many recipes unarguably Indian, and its appeal increasingly international. With that, it's a wrap. Leaving you with Gravitas Images. Thanks for watching.
Daughter Mika.